Hey guys, we are so lucky. It's beautiful right now. The rain just ducked away for a moment, so I'm taking full advantage, but I do have my rain gear on. We are looking at the Magnum Nomad. This is a really cool electric bike because I think it's really owning and accepting that whole like SUV, sport utility vehicle concept of an e-bike that's kind of a hybrid. You know, it has a suspension fork up here, and it's got these tires that they're fat tires, you know, 4 inches wide. They give you some stability and some comfort, but they were originally introduced for non-electric bikes for people to ride in like soft, loamy terrain, sand, snow. You could lower the PSI, the tire pressure, and you could float, and you could actually make it across some of that sort of terrain, which on a regular bike is just near impossible. So they're taking some of that fun, like capable off-road stuff, and then they're making it approachable and comfortable. Look at this stem here. Okay, it's already got a couple spacers and then a riser section here, and then it's adjustable from positive 30 to negative 30 degrees. We've got it kind of in the uprightmost position here, and that's gonna give my body a more upright, relaxed seating position. I'm not gonna have to lean over and have my wrists and my shoulder and my back feeling sensitive. And look at this handlebar. It's what I would consider a mid-rise. It's not flat like mountain bike handles, and it's not a cruiser bike, but it is swept back just a little bit, and it's a riser bar. We've got these comfortable ergonomic grips. We've got hydraulic disc brakes, which I love. These are from a company called Logan's. 3-finger adjustable reach, so you can adjust that set screw to bring them in or out depending on your body size, your hand size. And then we've got 180 millimeter rotors, front and rear, with dual piston calipers. So that is kind of an off-road, very strong, but still easy, comfortable. Like, these are the sorts of things that it's sort of nice to have on any bike. I don't think I'd ever say no to hydraulic disc brakes unless it was all about weight savings or something like that. For me to see those higher quality parts that are off-road capable, but connected to a bike that has fenders, like most mountain bikes don't have fenders. I was really happy to have them today because, again, it's wet. It's been raining like all day, and these things are set up perfectly for the tires. These are 110 millimeters wide, so they give you great clearance and coverage on these tires. I mentioned before, 4-inch wide. These are 26-inch by 4-inch, and they say max inflation 20 PSI. There's no branding on this at all. They just say nylon. They don't have reflective sidewalls. I don't know if they're puncture resistant. And if you look at that tread, again, they're not knobby. They're not really geared for like the snow or sand where they're gonna grab. This is a little bit smoother, quieter. Still a little bit of off-road, you know, maybe you're not gonna slide out. They're not pure slicks, but they're kind of close. So for me, this bike really straddles comfort and just sort of daily use. I mean, it's got this rear rack back here rated at 25 kilogram. That's 55 pounds. It comes with a triple bungee, so you really don't have to get any accessories. You could just use that to secure your jacket, or maybe get one of those egg crates and fasten it down like a college kid or something if you want. They connect right down here really easily and nicely. We've got also a pannier rod. This is standard gauge tubing versus a thicker gauge. And if you connect panniers to this, it would click on right here, and you'd still have room to connect maybe like a child seat or a trunk bag up top. So this is a really well-designed rack, and it's extra long. They've also got the light integrated into the rear, and you can see the cable running right down here. I love that they've taken some extra steps to make this bike like durable, reliable. We've got a steel derailleur guard, and that's going to protect the bike if it tips over. The derailleur is one of the more sensitive parts. And we also have a chainring guard. It's not a full guide, which would have a plate on the inside too, so the chain wouldn't bounce off track. But this is, you know, you're halfway there, and that's also going to provide some sort of like bash protection if you encounter a rock or like a really steep curb or something. So the bike is set up in a really thoughtful way. And again, I just think of it as like an SUV. It's an approachable frame. We've got this like mid-step design, so the standover height is a lot lower. You can step over the bike and then steady yourself a lot easier. Or if you're a rider who's maybe new, or you don't have like the best balance in the world, these tires are going to give you that stability because they're a little bit wider. And then being able to stabilize the frame and adjust the handlebar position, even the seat height. Check this out. It's only 300 millimeters long. Most seat posts I see are like 350. So to me, that was a little bit short, but you can drop it all the way down like that. And look at how low that is. That's a pretty low minimum saddle height. And imagine those handlebars are twisted back a little bit. Since they're mid-rise, they could come back closer to you and you could lower that stem. lots of possibilities here. Even the suspension fork, this is a little bit above average. I think it's steel. I used my magnet on this. It's not an air fork. It's not super lightweight. We've got 100 millimeters of technically of travel right there. I think it's probably more like 80 millimeters in practice. You know, decent. And then a clicker here for compression adjust that goes all the way to lockout. So, you know, you wouldn't be having this squishy bobbing feel, but you really shouldn't have too much of that because there's a preload adjuster here. So you can preload the spring if you're a heavier rider, or you can loosen it up so you actually get travel if you're a lighter person like myself. I'm about 5'9" tall and 135 pounds for reference. This bike feels great to me. They only sell it in one frame size, which you see here. They have 4 colors. So there's like this slate gray, which is nice, kind of classy looking. They have a white, which is going to be the most visible for people who are riding at night or early morning and you want to be seen from the sides. They also have like a green and then this like ocean blue. That's really neat. It's nice to have bikes that kind of look beautiful. I could totally see this as like a his and hers. You know, if you're a family and you get 2 of the bikes, you could swap the batteries back and forth. And one of the cool things about the bike is that the battery that comes with it is really high capacity. Okay, so this thing is 48 volt, which is kind of high power efficient voltage versus 36, 17.5 amp hours for a total of 840 watt hours. That's above average. I consider average to be like 500 watt hours. So this is significant. So this is the charger. I like that it's branded Magnum. It's got a little fan on it, so it'll stay cooler. Only weighs 1.5 pounds. And I like that the wall side can be unplugged so you can pack it a little bit more compact, and then they can probably sell different versions of this for different countries. So the charger itself is, at first I thought it was just kind of generic, but then when I read the details, this thing puts out 2.8 amps. And most e-bike chargers, especially kind of the cheap basic ones, they only put out 2 amps. So this is significantly faster. It's gonna fill the battery a little bit quicker, and it's nice because these are high capacity packs. And yeah, all in all, I'm kind of a fan of that. Like, good job, Magnum. And then the battery pack made by Rienshin. You can see the keys here are branded for that company, and we just insert the key here, twist it, it's spring loaded, so I kind of have to do this with you know, my fingers here and kind of balance the two. Take the battery off, 9.5 pounds. You really feel it. I mean, it's pretty dense. Comes off fairly easily. I like that it's sunk into the frame. It keeps that weight low and centered, and that you can charge this and store this off the bike. So ideally in a cool, dry location, and keep it around half full if you aren't using the bike. It's a pretty good setup. And with that second tube, as I've been doing ride tests and stuff, we have the down tube, we have the top tube. The bike feels stiff enough, right? I'm not feeling a lot of frame flex. Even though this is sort of a compromised down tube, I think this is tubular. So there's this flat portion here, but the bottom is actually more convex. So there's like it's almost like a tube right here in the bottom that gives it more strength. And that's important because if you load up that rear rack and with the heavier wheels and stuff, you don't want a bike that's kind of bouncing around and flexing. So all in all, good stuff. That's the battery. When it's time to put it back on the bike, you just line it up at the base, and then I think you can kind of just press it in. Yeah, you don't even need to fiddle with the keys, and take those off, double check that it's secure. I like that their battery pack also has a little USB charging port built in, and it's fairly high up here, so you could get like a right angle USB adapter like on Amazon or something, and then bring the wire up here to use with a smartphone or additional headlights or something. But I would probably just use this when the battery's off the bike. The locking mechanism is also up high, so you don't have to bend way down low, and you're not, you know, dealing with this crank arms and stuff right here. Although that is where the charging port is. So when you plug the battery in, just keep that in mind, because if these pedals get kicked, they could kind of, you know, bend that off or something, and that would be a bummer. The price with the 17.5 amp hour battery is $23.39, but you can get a 19.2 amp hour battery for just like $100 more, $24.29 USD, which I think is pretty cool. It's a neat option. It's going to give you extended range, and you might not fully discharge the battery as frequently, which would mean you get more full charge cycles. And it's probably only going to weigh like a pound more, so that's kind of cool to see. We have a really powerful motor back here, 750 watt rated, fat tire specific Bafang internally geared hub motor. peaks around 1,000 watts according to Magnum. So that's impressive, and it's nice to have that sort of power when you're moving a larger wheel, right? Because this is 26 by 4, so you're ending up with something that's more like a 28 in practice. You get the extra friction and drag, and the bike itself, it's not super light. This thing weighs like 76.4 pounds according to me. Like, I weighed it. The battery's 9.5 pounds. The motor's probably around 11 pounds. The official Magnum website said 74 pounds, so it feels like they're missing 2.5 pounds somewhere along the way. Unfortunately, I don't know the max weight capacity of the bike. Some of their older bikes I've looked at, they said 275 pounds. It was slightly above average. I'm not really sure, but I do know that they're using high quality hardware here. These are 12 gauge spokes, so a little bit thicker, 36 hole rims, front and rear. I think those are 13 gauge, so a little bit more flex, some weight savings up front. One thing they could have done to save weight is punched out these rims. So these are, I believe, double wall. They're 80 millimeters wide, and if you have these like holes through the rims, that takes off some material, and it might allow for some more like flex in the inner tube. You have to have a tire liner and stuff. So for me, it was like, good enough, sturdy, seems to be getting the job done. And I love that they got bottle cage bosses, by the way. It's something I point out a lot. A lot of companies will skip it, and I'm not sure they're perfectly positioned here, considering this is where you stand over the bike, and if you had to jump off the saddle, you don't want to rack yourself on that, but you don't have to use those if you don't want to. You know, between like a trunk bag or panniers, or even some of those cup holders that mount to your handlebars, but it's still a nice option. Maybe you have like a mini pump or a folding lock or something. So I appreciate that Magnum put those there, and you could always unscrew these bolts and make it even smoother and more aesthetically pleasing. Since the frame is aluminum alloy, it's not like it's going to be rusting or anything. If you get water in there, water will probably just kind of trickle out somewhere down here. The fork up here, as I was talking about, it's nice to have some adjustability. It's not as light because it's a spring fork, and I believe this is just 1.125" straight steer tube, so you can't upgrade this to like an air fork with a tapered steer, which is, you know, we're talking more like the extreme mountain biking kind of stuff. You're kind of stuck with the 1.125", and then this is just a 9mm quick release skewer. It's not a through axle or anything fancy like that. In the rear, we've got a 12mm threaded axle with some flats, so it's keyed, so you can see the flat section here, and it sort of pushes against the frame when the motor is active. I don't see a torque arm here, but it is fairly thick, and we do have a torque washer, so it seems to be, you know, kind of good enough. We'll put this plastic cover back on, and then we're back over here looking at the drivetrain. I talked about how this steel derailleur guard is really nice. Magnum does ship direct. You can buy it online. It'll show up in a big box. And they say it's 70% assembled, which is pretty good, but you're probably gonna have to put the wheel on and maybe straighten the handlebars and stuff, which means tightening some of these bolts. They also have a pretty vast network of dealers. So I was just over at Cap's Electric Bikes in Port Moody, British Columbia, and they've got a bunch of Magnum bikes, and I can kind of pick the colors. I could test ride it and see how it feels. Okay, so before we actually hop on and do the ride test, I wanted to call out a couple of other things that I noticed. I didn't see a slap guard here on the right chainstay, which, you know, this chain can bounce around a little bit. This derailleur, it's, you know, one step up from the base level in the Shimano group set. It's Altus, it's just not as tight, and that means that the chain, especially in these higher gears, can get close to this and chip the paint and stuff. So a lot of times I'll have like a clear sticker. You can always use box tape and just kind of make your own, or get one off Amazon. There's like the neoprene wraps. The challenge is these wires and stuff, sometimes they would rub if you actually have a wrapping slap guard. And then down here we have the motor quick disconnect. You are going to need, I think, like an 18mm tool to get the rear wheel off to do service, and so I you know, follow the inflation recommendations here, the 20 psi. But keep in mind, if you lower this a little bit, I think you can go all the way down to 5 psi on a lot of these fat tire bikes that I've seen. I know it doesn't say it here, but if you did that, you'd be able to go over that soft terrain, I think, pretty capably, especially since this bike has a throttle and such a powerful motor. So yeah, I wish there was a slap guard right there. As nice as the headlight is, you know, it's super bright and everything, it'd be nice if there were some side cutouts, just so you could get some side visibility. And that's where I come back to that white frame being a good option if you're riding in, you know, dimly lit kind of conditions. The shifting mechanism up here, it's this big Shimano SIS index shifter. You know, very intuitive, but you have to like really reach to get that higher lever versus these little trigger shifters down here. I'm, you know, maybe a more advanced rider, and I like the little triggers. They're really quick, and I want to keep my hand secure on that handle. But one of the benefits of kind of a bigger, you know, very visual display like this is that, you know, if you're wearing gloves, these levers are very separate and they're very big, so it's easy to interact with, and it provides some room for this, you know, twist throttle right here versus the little trigger shifters. If we come down to the derailleur, I mentioned it's Altus. This is a freewheel, not a cassette, so it's not, maybe not quite as sturdy, and your spread is a little bit limited. It's 14 to 28 tooth. It's nice if you can get like 11 to 32 or something like this. This just means it'd be nice if that was a little bit wider. 52 tooth chainring. So this is, it's really big. It kind of slows down and helps to maybe achieve and maintain those higher speeds. So I think they're doing what they can there. This is just standard steel. It's not narrow wide or anything like that. Kind of basic parts here and there, but for a bike that's kind of that SUV concept that we were talking about, I think they do a good job. It looks good. It rides well. So it's been raining off and on, and I thought it would be a little bit easier to show you some of the electronics and the display inside. So to start the bike, there is a power button down here, the lower portion of this like ring button pad, up, M, and down. So if we hold the power button for just a second, this display, it's like 3.5 inches in diagonal. Very cool. I like this thing a lot. It's got pretty much every readout that I appreciate. We've got a battery infographic with 5 bars, but when it boots up, you can see a percentage readout too. So I feel like there's got to be a way to have a percentage readout. I haven't figured it out. In fact, I haven't been able to get into the settings menu. Normally you'd hold up and down simultaneously, but that hasn't worked. I reached out to Magnum, and if I hear back from them, I will update that in the written review. We have these 5 levels of assist. Right now it's in eco. You can turn that off, and if you do, nothing works. The twist throttle isn't active, pedal assist isn't active. It's basically just kind of a big, heavy, fat tire bike, but the display still shows how fast you go, you know, your time, and you can still use the lights. And the lights on this bike are just fantastic. Both brake levers here have motor inhibitors as well as brake light activation. So whether the lights are on or not, if you pull the brake, you get this blinking mode, which is unique. A lot of times I'm used to seeing just sort of like a brighter mode for the brake. I haven't seen this blinking feature very frequently, and it probably generates a little bit more attention and awareness for cars that are going by. So let's turn the lights on by holding the up arrow, and we'll notice that the display actually dims a little bit to help preserve your night vision. You know, it darkens so you can pay attention to the darker setting. 2 LED headlight. I love this thing. It's really bright, it's aimable, it's mounted to the arch of the suspension fork, so it might bounce around a little bit more. It's not suspended. It'd be cool if it was mounted up here, maybe on the handlebar or something, but Magnum does have this, I think it's roughly $109, this optional tray front rack that mounts here, in which case the light might need to be moved a little bit. Looks like there's extra slack in the cable. Maybe you have to mount that to the front. I don't have that tray accessory, but it's neat to see this. So coming back to the display, we have those different levels of assist. As soon as you go back to eco, which is where it starts by default, then the throttle becomes active and you can get full power with that throttle. So it isn't dependent on the level of assist. And for me, that's great. It is a variable speed. So you twist it further, you get more power, more speed. A watt meter over here, so the power that the bike is putting out. There's the headlight icon. I'm gonna go ahead and turn those lights off by holding the up arrow again, and you'll see how it got a lot brighter. That's what I'm talking about. And then down here, we got a bunch of different menus between a timer, or current time, I think right now, and then a trip distance. If we press this M button, we're gonna cycle through some different readouts. We got max speed, odometer, and then trip time. Yeah, so, and then average speed up here. So it just kind of cycles through a few different menus, pretty much got all the readouts that you could want, and they're fairly big, they're easy to see, and with this mid-rise handlebar, the display seems fairly well protected. If the bike crashed or something, this is not removable, but it is adjustable angle, so you can cut down the glare if you need to. The other secret about this control pad is that if you hold the down arrow, we're going to activate walk mode. So, you know, goes a couple miles per hour, the bike will push itself, which can be really handy if you're trying to go across the field and it's just kind of choppy and you don't want to ride. Maybe you've got a child seat on the back and you're in a crowded place, and again, you don't want to ride the bike, but you do want help carrying that additional weight. And the bike's already fairly heavy as it is, so I love that they've got walk mode. I really liked the display that they chose, and the cockpit in general, you know, there's kind of a mess of wires over here, and they've just gone with Velcro, but those wires do become internally routed here. And I like the features. You know, the extra wires are because we have the brake lever motor inhibitors and the brake light blinking thing we talked about. There's just no way around it. These are press fit. I believe they're Gillette color-coded connectors. They're easy and pretty affordable to replace on your own. One of the highlights for me is really the pedals. They went with the name brand Wellgo aluminum alloy platform. Very good, large surface area with nice fixed pins. And I just love that you can pedal backwards like that without getting pedal lock on that center custom kickstand. It even cycles the chain. So if you're someone who's trying to do some lubrication of the drivetrain or adjust that derailleur with a little barrel adjuster, you can do that, and the bike just stands itself up. I really like that. So let's stow the kickstand. Just put your foot right in front of it like that, and it doesn't quite spring up on its own. Might have to kick it. I was talking about ground clearance earlier, and I just want you to see, like, that does hang down a little bit, but not that much further than the chain ring. So I think it's a good solution, and it's going to be a little bit steadier for loading the bike than like a side stand, and it's not going to interfere with your disc brake or anything back here. Okay, I'm going to step over the frame. Nice approachable mid-step design. Stand up on this thing, pedal along. I'm in eco right now, and it's pretty zippy. Yeah, it's surprisingly so. Sometimes eco is like, you can hardly feel it. On this one, you know, it comes to life. Let's go up to maybe sport. I think a lot of people would use that. Very comfortable. You know, it gets us to like 15, 16 miles per hour, and then it sort of fades out. I like to do the no hands test. It really demonstrates how stable these fat tires are. Even if I shake the bike a little bit, it tracks nicely. Now let's take it up to the highest level of assist, boost. I'm gonna go ahead, shift gears, so it slows my cadence down. 20, 21, 22. Maybe this one was unlocked. So that's that higher speed riding that you can use to get to work a little bit easier, quicker. Maybe you can use it on private property depending on the rules where you live. And then if you're climbing a hill like this and you haven't shifted down, you know, it's going to be hard to get going again. So this is where the throttle is really nice. You can just ease into it, don't have to pedal at all. Very capable climbing that. Very easy to stop here with those hydraulic disc brakes. It's a brand I'm not super familiar with, but you know, functionally, they seem to be doing a great job. There we go. I'm gonna go off the curb up here. Yeah, really squishy. The tires and the suspension fork, they make the bike very comfortable. And I have that upright body position because of how we adjusted the handlebars, but I am hearing the chain like kind of bounce around because of, yeah, just kind of a softer derailleur. Thought it'd be fun to do some off-roading here. Really nice. Fenders are keeping me nice and dry. Beautiful, beautiful fall day, huh? A big stick. So both of my parents have bought fat tire bikes, kind of like this, in recent years, and they chose this because my mom had an issue where she was riding her bike and kind of got hung up on train tracks. Her tire got caught between and she crashed. And so one of the benefits of the fat tires like this is that's less likely, or you know, if you hit a stick or an obstacle, these tires tend to just absorb it and go over it without getting taken off track so much. So that's another reason to consider it. The biggest question mark is weight. You know, are you putting this on your car? Is your car rack weighted for enough for this? I measure all the specs for the bikes when I review them like this, and so I've measured the wheelbase. So you might want to check your rack and see if this thing's going to be hanging off the back of your rack. Are your straps long enough to secure these big fat tires? Those are some of the questions that you might want to ask before getting a fat tire bike versus a traditional kind of skinny tire. Okay, so it's fun to get that first person perspective here. Do some riding around. A little bit of off-road stuff. Whoa. There we go. Boy. Maybe jump it a little bit. It actually caught some air. That was fun. You can really hear that chain, you know, making contact with the kickstand. I'm not sure what to do about that. I think that's just sort of the way it's set up. Just something you're going to hear because of this design. You know, the chain is so close to it. Maybe if I wonder even if I switch gears into a higher gear, see if that moves it at all. There we go. Still sounds like we're hearing it a little bit. So yeah, see, I'm in a higher gear, like a smaller cog back here, but because of the derailleur position, the hanger, the chain just goes right by the kickstand. Not a huge deal, but this is basically a brand new bike, and the test rides plus me riding it a little bit has taken the paint off. That is aluminum alloy, just like the rest of the frame. The only thing that was steel that I found was the chain ring itself, which is for strength, so those teeth are strong, and then the stanchions here for the suspension fork. So let's take this for a spin again. So I'll use pedal assist here. When you're not on a bumpy terrain, you really don't hear it. The chain isn't making contact. Feeling good. Go through some water here and test the fenders. Isn't this beautiful? Hey, bud. Wow, it's just like a tunnel of leaves. So beautiful. We're just so thankful that the rain stopped. What a gorgeous day, guys. Now let's do the top speed test. Yeah, 25. Coasting down a hill. See, the throttle wasn't activating until we're below 20. I think that's the cutoff. And the cadence is actually fairly decent at these higher speeds. I'm not beating eggs, spinning really fast. Go down to the lowest gear. Yeah, it doesn't have a super low gear. Good enough. Bike is really playful. Even though this thing looks really big and is kind of heavy, with that motor, I mean, I'm doing like wheelies, but it feels like walking on the moon. You know, everything's kind of like soft and bouncy. It's been a lot of fun. So that is the Magnum Nomad electric bike. I have all the specs back at ElectricBikeReview.com. Measure them by hand. I do my best to be thorough so that you know how long and wide it is, and try to get that accurate weight and everything else. There are comment section there so you can see what other people think, as well as a forum and a compare tool, so you can compare this to other fat tire bikes and see what you're getting for the money, or see what other color options are available from different companies. You know, I like Magnum products. I've been reviewing them for years and years and years, and one of the biggest features for me, or selling points, is that they do have those dealers, and they use batteries that tend to be cross-bike compatible, and they're fairly consistent with their hardware. So, you know, it's somewhat modular. Something breaks, you can get a replacement. They've got good customer support. That's worth something to me. So I love you guys. I hope you have fun out there, and we'll see you next time.